I am Flavia Beliania Zimmerman from the Australian Institute of International Affairs in Western Australia, and today we have with us Russian Ambassador to Australia, His Excellency Mr. Grigory Logvinov, and we'll be discussing current perspectives in Russia foreign policy. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, my pleasure.
Please, can you explain to us the leading political drives in Russian foreign policy?
Well, actually, I think that the political drivers in Russian policy, foreign policy, are the same like century ago and would be the same century after. Well, actually, it's very simple. There is nothing dramatic, nothing explicitly special. It's to create a favorable foreign environment for domestic development, for the raise of economy, for the enhancement of living standards of Russian people. And that means, first of all, peace and friendly, mutually beneficial cooperation with the outside countries. Mm-hmm. That's all.
Thank you. And regarding the situation in Crimea, could you please explain to us what are the main Russian interests in Crimea and also Russian positioning in the region?
Yes. You see, it's of course a very sensitive question, and one should understand the Russian interest, Russian motivation, and Russia's sentiments. Well, Crimea is some kind of sacred place for Russia, because you know the Russian prince or duke who brought Christianity to Russia was baptized in Crimea. Crimea was Russian territory starting end of 18th century. Actually, in 1791 we signed a treaty on friendship and cooperation with Turkey. It was during the time of Russia's Empress Catherine the Great. And one of the articles in this treaty states that from now and forever more, indefinitely long, Crimea is part of Russia. And, well, the complete peninsula is shed with the blood of Russian soldiers and warriors, because, you see, there were fierce battles there, and especially in the Second World War. And, you know, when Crimea was transferred to Ukraine by a unilateral decision by that time Soviet leader Khrushchev, it caused a lot of critique inside Soviet Union, and actually there was a special decision that it was against Constitution, and regrettably it was possible in Soviet Union that the Constitution was easily changed. What about the city of Sevastopol? Illegally it was never transferred to Ukraine because it was directly subordinate to the federal government, not the Republican government. But the issue is that the population of Crimea didn't want to live in Ukraine, which became Russophobic, severely anti-Russian. They didn't want Crimea to become a place for NATO military bases. That's why they voted for not independence but being transferred to Russia. 97%, you see. We know a lot of critics as if we faked it, but how can one fake? And furthermore, the situation is stable, is quiet, people enjoying their life in Crimea. And if they were against Russia, how could we keep it under control without we don't have any occupation army there, we don't have any enormous police and security force. That's why it's the will of the people.
Thank you very much for your remarks. And regarding claims of Russian meddling in the US elections and the upcoming middle-term elections, if you could please unpack a little bit more and tell us about Russian understanding of those claims.
Well, Russia's understanding is very simple. It's complete nonsense. Well, what about me personally? I believe it's kind of disgrace for American people. You know, you may have seen my CV. I've served in the United States assigned to our embassy there for 5 years. I had a lot of friends and colleagues, both within the governmental agencies, think tanks, among common Americans. And I don't believe that Americans are that silly and simple-minded that some hacker can make them change their mind and vote for, not for someone they want to vote for, but vote for somebody else. That's why, for me, it's complete nonsense.
Thank you very much. And regarding the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia with the nerve agent Novichok, can you please explain to us the Russian views on the way the English government dealt with this issue, and particularly how the international media dealt with this issue?
First of all, one should understand what you mean when saying international media, because usually my interlocutors understand only Western media. Secondly, let's do it in this way. First of all, the nerve agent, called Novichok, was never developed, never produced either in Soviet Union nor in Russia. Actually, for the first time, the very name Novichok was articulated in 1998 by American laboratory. At that time, they presented its formula and, mass spectra. Once again, the Novichok name isn't coming from Russia. Secondly, all allegations are based on the testimonies of Russian defectors who in reality had no connection to production of chemical and development of chemical weapons in the former Soviet Union. This stuff called Novichok was produced in about 20 countries, including US, UK, and UK. In UK, particularly this Porton Down laboratory. That's why you see the picture. Well, next, we from the very beginning, proposed that we should address this issue according to protocols of OPCW, and they have very strict protocol regarding such situation. But the Brits didn't want it. They didn't provide any data, nothing to us. Actually, we forwarded the Brits over 70, maybe 80 questions on this issue via our embassy in London, and none of them was answered. Not a single proof, only highly likely, highly likely, highly likely. We believe the highly likely, or what has been told by the Brits, is a lie. That's all.
All right. In your opinion, have Russian-Western relations moved away from perceptions from the Cold War?
Regrettably, they've got back to the perceptions of the Cold War. And it is extremely worrisome. 60 years ago, nearly 60 years ago, the world needed Caribbean crisis to prevent Cold War turn into hot war. I don't know what kind of crisis some states in the modern world want. To stop to stop further negative development of international situation, and how serious, how sensitive it is, will illustrate the events in Syria. Here, you see one crisis after another. Once a Russian bomber was shot by Turkish fighters. Thanks God we had enough wisdom. Both leaders of both states have wisdom, courage to get out of it. All these chemical accidents, we provide a lot of proofs that were faked. Now, this tragic with Russian reconnaissance plane. you should understand how close it brings us to a full-scale military conflict when armed forces of number of countries are in close contact, in direct contact in Syria. And one should be very careful about it.
Absolutely. Wrapping up our interview, could you please explain to us in which ways the Russian relationship between Western nations could improve, and also how Australian foreign policy has incorporated some of these anti-Russia narratives?
Yeah. Well, the problem is that the issue is not with Russia only or Western countries only. The core of the problems is that the whole world, whole system of international relations is basically changing. And a couple of decades ago, the world situation was really, first of all, influenced by the behavior, by the decisions of developed countries of G7, G8, as Russia at that time was a member of the club. Now it's not the situation. The world is really getting multipolar. One can't ignore the influence of China. Well, China is one of two major giants of the international arena. India, ASEAN. One has to understand and accept it. Regrettably, not everybody in the West is ready to live with such understanding and still trying to uphold the old standards, patterns of behavior, and so on. That's why we believe number one issue is to get back to the basics of diplomacy, its dialogue, its mutual respect, mutual consideration of each party's interests, concerns, approaches, and so on. What about Australia? Well, you are members of the Western Club, I should say. You are military allies of the United States. That's why you fulfill your obligations within this framework. We understand, of course, the whole deterioration in relations between Russia and the West had its negative impact of Russian-Australian relations. Well, you know, two diplomats were expelled from our embassy in Canberra. Well, and reciprocally two Australians from Moscow. Yeah, but, well, yes, a number of political contacts were put on hold. But at the same time, we feel and we see that Australia understands that dialogue and positive development of contacts with Russia meets the Australian basic interests. That's why we are trying to do our best to find a kind of harmony, yes, between your obligations within your alliance with US and your cooperation partnership with whole Western country and your national interests. And, well, that's diplomacy. What for?
Thank you so much.
Well, my pleasure.
Pleasure talking to you. And for more information, please visit our website www.internationalaffairs.org.au. Thank you.